Welcome to Church Pulse Weekly. I'm Carey Newhoff, and man, I'll tell you, it's wonderful to have David Kinnaman with me today. David, welcome back.
Thanks, Carey. It's so good to see you, man. It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. And for those of you who have tracked with the show or follow David, you probably know what's happening. For those of you who are new or who might not know, this is a very different kind of episode. So, David has been off on bereavement leave for the last 3 months after the passing of his wife, Jill. And in this episode, we just wanted to talk more about David, what that journey has been like for you, how you're doing as a friend and as a leader. You were a leader I followed before you became a friend, and we've been friends for well over a decade now. And so I just want to say on behalf of everybody listening, all the leaders listening, just thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you're doing. And we've all been praying for you, and we have all been in your corner. Not only over these last few months, but over the last few years as Jill's gone through her journey. So, yeah, it's good to have you back.
Thanks. Well, it feels good to be back. I'm sort of coming back into some work here after 3 months off. I'm for the company. I'm actually still what I describe as in the background, but not back because
Right.
the team is doing such a good job, and it's been awesome to see Todd White and Joe Jensen and Elise Youngblood and Matt Randerson and Daniel Copeland and on and on and on. Brooke Hempel, others, Savannah Kimberlin, just doing really great work, the whole team. And so for me, it's been nice to see some new patterns. As leaders, sometimes we're just like right in the mix of everything. But I've every week been just working a little bit more and just doing what comes naturally. It almost feels like having gone through what I imagine would be like open heart surgery or a major medical crisis personally. And so coming back just slowly, just giving myself permission just to do a few things and take it easy on myself, give myself grace, give grace to others. But it feels good to see you again, Carey, and just to sort of, begin to sort of feel like, oh yeah, this is a little bit what it's like to feel like a human again.
Hmm. Well, and I think, you and I started this podcast about 11 months ago, if you're time stamping it, to talk about the crisis. And as you and I were saying, by the time we hit late summer, there's a crisis within a crisis within a crisis. I mean, we've got the pandemic, we got race relations, we had political disruption, we've had more than any of us ever would have guessed a year ago. But then for some leaders, yourself included, that's been coupled with a personal crisis. And so for you, it was the terminal cancer of your wife, Jill, and navigating everything that involved. But a lot of leaders, they're kind of running two tracks. It's tough at home. They've got some health challenges. Somebody that they care about is not in a good place, or there's some other, like, not a leadership crisis per se or a global crisis, but just some other stuff that they're navigating. And that's a whole level of complication that and difficulty that leaders haven't had. So thank you so much for being willing to come on and just talk to us about David, not just the president of Barna and not the researcher, the leader we know, but just you as a friend. And I want to go back to the beginning. Tell me about you and Jill, like when you met and how you fell in love, and what caught your eye. We all have that moment, right? And you guys, how old were you when you met Jill?
I was 16. We're both 16 years old. We turned
Wow.
17 just a few months after we met.
You didn't have a
Yeah.
fierce beard like this back then, did you? For those
No,
of you
it
who are
was it was
watching?
very
No.
it was an aspiring beard at that time, but it was the teenage version of this. But yeah, so we met at at a high school in Mesa, Arizona, where we were
Yeah.
both growing up. And we were in trigonometry class, and it was the hot end of summer in Phoenix, 100 plus degrees, and we were in a portable.
Oh boy.
And so we met in that class. And one of the crazy things was I sort of thought she was really beautiful right at the very first day. I remember sort of like, oh wow, she's cute. And so she was a senior, I was a junior. Even though we were very close in age, she was a little academically a year ahead of me, and she was what I describe as a swim goddess. So she was captain of the swim team and a very competitive swimmer in the state of Arizona. Actually, she'd really aspired to go to the Olympics and do some, sort of like, collegiate swimming and all the rest.
Hmm.
And anyway, that didn't end up working out for her. She decided she wanted just to go to a Christian college and not swim competitively because it took so much time.
Yeah.
But what was really cool was at the end of the sort of the first semester, we didn't really know each other very well. But this is sort of true story. My pure-hearted self at the end of Christmas break, I prayed that God would rearrange the seating so that we could sit next to each other in coming into the spring semester. And sure enough, Jill was sitting next to me at the beginning of the spring semester, which really sparked the ability for me to, throw on all my geeky charm and help her with her trigonometry homework.
That's such a 16-year-old prayer, isn't it? But
It is.
you don't really want to lose that either as you get
No.
older. So Jill, obviously you fell in love, you got married, you had kids together, and you said, she's the mother of your children, your best friend, your wife, your lover, but also a business partner as well. That she was involved at Barna. So tell us a little bit about what she brought to all of that as a mom, as your wife, like who was she?
Yeah, so we met at age 16 and got married at 22, and then dated for 5 years, and then we were married almost 25 years. So just a few months shy of our 25th anniversary. And as a business partner, it was kind of cool that when we first got married, she was actually a elementary education major, but then when I started working with George and Nancy Barna, George asked me to, I was an intern. I sort of ran the field center. I got a full-time job coming out of Biola University. I got an offer from George and Nancy Barna to work with them. And Nancy was really smart. She is really smart. She's an amazing business lady. She's incredible. She's been a mentor to me as much as George was on the research side. Nancy Barna was a mentor to me on the business side. And so she actually hired Jill too, figuring that sort of two are better than one. And she says now that, she saw right away that there was something, some potential with me, and she wanted Jill to get really like exposure to the kind of business that, she and George were running. And so we ended up, getting married. We moved to California. We were going to school, but we got married in Arizona. And we moved all of our stuff to Glendale, California, and then we ended up moving the business to Ventura, California, in 1996. And so for many years, Jill was working here, doing bookkeeping, doing sort of general management work, scheduling, just a ton of different things. She would actually travel with George and Nancy Barna on seminar trips, and so selling books in the back of the room. And so, a lot of the things that we've lost include, the ability really to like think about the business and the mission and the ministry together. What was cool, she was such a deep believer in it, and a deep believer that God was calling me to do, things in my life and with our lives. But she was also very open-handed about that. I remember doing a life plan together where in 2008, 2007, 2008, I was like not clear about what I wanted to do next. I thought I might want to sort of take on Barna Group, but there were lots of other things I was sort of thinking about. So we did this whole life plan, and she had to leave a little early. Then she texted me on the way to the airport. She's like, "Hey, so what do you want to do? Like, if you want to leave Barna, if you want to go do something else, I'm game." It's just very like, there was no like stickiness for her. So she was a wonderful partner. And then when she got sick in 2017, I remember really feeling the weight of not being able to process the decisions that we had to make in life, and the people we were hiring and the people that we were bringing onto the business. And in a lot of ways, I actually think our my leadership suffered, because for a lot of reasons, as she declined, because she was such an amazing partner, and also totally unimpressed by the stuff that I was doing. So she would she would be like, "Hey, what's the name of that book you finished just recently?" She couldn't remember the titles of the books. And I'd travel and she'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing again today? I have no idea what you're doing." So it was pretty cute how her frame of reference was very different and kept me grounded.
I'd love to go back to 2017 when you first got the diagnosis of Jill's brain cancer. Now, I've never navigated anything like that, but a lot of leaders have, with someone close to them. What was that like for you? And what was it like for the kids to realize, oh, we got something really serious here?
Well, there's we could spend weeks and months just talking about, the emotions of all that. But, I was in Colorado actually on the day that she was diagnosed. She had been having major headaches, and I actually, got a call from her. She was taking herself to the ER because she was just couldn't take it anymore, and needed some relief from the pain. And our lives really changed. Obviously, she had a major brain tumor, and trying to figure out how to get to her, talk to the kids about why mom wasn't picking them up from school. So many things that you never prepare for. And so it's been an interesting journey of trying to figure out how to lead through loss. And I think you're right. As we're talking about this, clearly, thank you for all you've been doing, Carey, to keep the podcast going. Thanks to leaders who've been supporting Barna, who've been praying for me, and so many of us as leaders, as you said, whether it's there isn't much else that's as difficult as losing a spouse, but we're all going through aspects of loss that are very difficult, and trying to hold ourselves together, allowing the Lord to minister into us at the places where we're the weakest, and just realizing, I mean, one of the themes for me this last 4 years, and certainly the last year, is like, I don't really control as much as I imagine I do. And it's not that much other than just my own heart and response and reaction. And even that is God's grace. So it's been a real journey of just acknowledging all the places in my life that I thought I could control, and all the things that really just are completely at the mercy of life and circumstances and God's unfolding will in our lives. And so it was a very difficult thing. The crazy thing was, so she called me on that Monday morning. I was with a client in Colorado, and I said, go to the ER, get taken care of, get some pain medication. She thought she had a pinched nerve. Her primary care physician had said, I think it's just a pinched nerve. And so, I got on a plane because I felt like this was a category different than the usual sort of like, hey, I've just got a headache and I need some medication. I felt like this sense from the Holy Spirit, it was time to kind of come home. And I logged onto my computer to Wi-Fi on the plane, and in the middle seat, I got the text from Jill, said, "Hey, the CAT scan shows that it's a tumor." And I just remember the feelings of that, sort of just this, if you've ever seen like the movie The Hulk, or it's just like this welling anger and frustration and just like fear. And I have one of those biometric watches that shows your heartbeat, and it was just like, it was really like, in the 60s, 70s, and then it just went up to like 130, and it was like up in the 130s or 140s for an hour plus until we landed, and started to have to make phone calls. And so just the miracles of modern life, being on a plane, getting a text from your wife, and she was just like plain, it's just like, hey, so they're going to be transferring me to another hospital, I'll see you when you get there. She was just, she was amazing. Literally just through the whole 4 years, she just was such a champion. Sometimes I think it is easier being the person sick than the people around you who are trying to put their their lives together in some ways. But she was just an absolute champ, and her faith in Jesus was one of the things that really drove her through all that. But anyway, crazy little part of the story was finding out about the tumor on a in-flight Wi-Fi.
David, you and I've had lots and lots of conversations at different points over this 4-year journey. And I would love for you just to be able to share, and you're right, this could be a book, this could be a whole podcast in and of itself, but the dynamics of loss. You've had all the emotions and then some, and some I remember one conversation we had after Jill's death where you're like, and some I didn't even know I had. Can you walk us through that? Just this kind of thing, I'm sure, is just sometimes if you help hear other people name it, you're like, oh yeah, that's what I'm feeling, because you're not alone in this journey. What have been
Well,
the dynamics?
I do think that what we've all experienced this last year is a journey of loss and a lack of control, and showing how much the things and the systems and the structures and all the things we count as important are less significant or less controllable. And we've all been leading through some kind of loss. I mean, if you're a pastor, your church isn't quite the same as it was. Sort of hopefully there's things that are stronger about it, but we're all realizing the things that we sort of put our trust in can sometimes be skin deep. Or an MRI, like an MRI can change our whole perspective about life. But there's a few things I could highlight. I mean, first, I said it earlier, this sense of being out of control and realizing God's care for me and for us in the midst of that. Like the peace that passes understanding to me in this last 3 months has been that I loved this woman so much, and that somehow I can continue to move forward and make spaghetti for my kids, or love on my kids, and enjoy a cup of coffee. I mean, like, the fact that we can sort of move on in our lives and feel this great, what I describe as insurmountable grief, but be able to move forward, is something like a peace that passes understanding. And so we had all sorts of dreams for the second half of our life. The kids are our youngest is almost 17. We had thoughts and ideas about traveling and hospitality and hosting people, and travel and all sorts of things. And so it's I feel like a lot of my dreams died with Jill, and I have to go build some new dreams. But I think it's okay for us as leaders. And I saw this in George and Nancy's leadership. I've seen this in my father's leadership, Carey Kinnaman, who led a big church in Phoenix. This idea of like not holding things too tightly. And when I talked to Jill about the business before she died, I was like, hey, do you want me to, what do you want me to do with Barna? It's like, it's part of our legacy. And, and honestly, friends, it's a big challenge, as you and I have talked about, Carey. Like, what do I do now? What do I do next?
Yep.
Not making any big decisions with anything. But Jill was like, hey, you should keep the company if you want to keep it. You should sell the company if you want to sell it. Don't do anything out of my memory, because part of the legacy could also continue. And so much of what we've done together and what George and Nancy built, there's lots of different ways that God might use this. And so, it's just a really, I think I'm just early on in this journey of trying to put even words to all of it, but recognizing that we're not in control, that the Lord is. There's this really interesting phrase that Paul says, sort of, as the Lord allows, here's my plans. And so I think we should, as leaders, get better and better with this kind of phrasing of, as the Lord allows, as we're able to see, the sort of like driving through the fog with the headlights. You really can't see the whole road ahead of you. You can just see just far enough so they don't drive off the road. And I think this journey of grief, part of why I'm sort of slowly easing back, why I was committed to bereavement leave, why even in coming into the background, I'm not sort of back yet, is just I realize that I've got to give myself permission just to sort of get whole again. And it's not easy to do because there's so much to do. And so anyway, those are just a few thoughts.
Yeah, we've had so many conversations, but one of the things that really impacted me was what you briefly touched on in your last answer, which is, because you're in your mid 40s right now?
Yeah, I'm 47.
47. And you said to me, I think at the time you were 46, and you just said, I had this picture of what my life was going to be like. Our kids' graduations, our kids' weddings, grandkids, things we do one day, where the company was going to be at, where we were going to be at. And all those are gone. Like, when the diagnosis became terminal, you were seeing the death of a dream. And I just, that really hit me emotionally. I talked to Tony about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even realize how much I am living for those moments, because I tend to be very anchored in the present. Any thoughts on how you navigate that when a dream dies, when the picture of what is ahead is so fundamentally different from anything you had imagined to that point?
Well, I could say that part of the answer to that is to give you and listeners a stretch out the last 4 years. So, June 5th, she gets diagnosed. June 7th, she gets the surgeries. June 9th, she's home. She's actually better and more herself for those 2 weeks. And then she gets desperately sick with an infection after the operation, has several different operations to clear out the infection. And then the late summer and fall of 2017 were just horrific. She really lost her mind because of the infection. Really battled back. I mean, she battled back to all of us. And so we went through a period of really having to figure some of that out, of like, what does it mean for us as a family to, lose Jill, or maybe to have to care for her in a diminished state. So as a family, we really had to wrestle with, what does it mean for us to care for Jill, in a diminished state? And we, it wasn't terminal at that moment, but it was obviously pretty significant. And then 2019, early 2019 were actually really good. And so we actually started to dream a little about what, a different kind of life would look like, but a life continuing for her. And then she got sick in 2019, late 2019, October of 2019. And the nature of that, sort of recurrence was such that it was like on the other side of the brain and multiple tumors. And the doctors that were the most honest with us, which is a really interesting thing. Not every doctor is really honest with you. And that's something I think is really hard to navigate, is finding someone who can really help you grapple with the honest truth of it. And not to be, sort of fatalistic. But that's a whole different discussion we could have about sort of a philosophy of healthcare today, and how people who don't believe in an afterlife, kind of try to just, make what days you have remaining sort of, as bearable as possible, and sort of like just sort of a false optimism. But the doctor who was the most honest with us said, hey, enjoy this next year. And almost she died 54 weeks later.
Wow.
And so he was just spot on. And so as you think about, as for leaders, I mean, there's some practical things I would recommend to you, having gone through this. And again, nobody plans for these things, but first we had great health care. We had some life insurance. We did not have the kind of long-term disability care that I think we really all should have. So just as a plug, like, take care of your personal business, get your will in order, take care of your kids, think about some of these things that, again, the odds are they don't happen. But it's kind of crazy because I think we buy like warranties on, like our radios and our what's a radio, or, our computer equipment.
Yeah, I have Apple Care Plus on my phone just in case.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we don't have, like a will in case our kids need, lose their parents. And so I just really remind leaders and listeners that, it's just good stewardship, and none of us are promised anything. Again, I hope that's never, the scenario for you, but I've been looking kind of holistically at, now, because now I'm the only one my kids have. And so how do I make sure that, that they don't have to worry about the same things I had to worry about for Jill? And, just doing a full audit of that is really important. But, sort of recognizing that as we went through this last 4 years, there were so many different twists and turns of, what I wanted to do with my life, and how I might, sort of think about caregiving for her, sort of like right this minute, sort of 90 plus days since her passing. I'm realizing how much of a full-time job it was to care for her in the last year, emotionally, time, money, effort. And so part of what has been good about the bereavement leave has just been kind of just decompressing from the pressures of running Barna, and caring for Jill, sort of 2 full-time jobs at the same time. And so trying to come back, in any kind of healthy way, it's important for me to sort of disentangle some of those things. But yeah, just processing the grief, realizing that, God can use us in a lot of different ways. Jill and I both made a commitment early on that we wanted to be very open about the journey that she was on. She was very willing for us to blog about it at prayforjill.com. And, I think that's been a real encouragement to people, because, like, this was the ultimate test of our faith and of, what we believe and how we wanted to live our lives. And, she was super faithful and all that. And, so anyway, it's been a crazy journey. And I think we're just beginning to sort of put some perspective and some, sense of like what has God been showing to us through all this.
What is helping you grieve?
Just slowing down, acknowledging and feeling the things that we're feeling, acknowledging in our, like as I've started to come into the background of some business meetings or client discussions, or with a podcast, I've been saying, hey, I'm out of balance, so I'm not going to be, I'm not going to feel normal for a while, and I'm okay with that, and I need you all to be like, we're trying to articulate and say some things for people, for everyone around me, right? And so my relationship with my kids has been just such a gift in the last 4 years. I feel like, there's not many things that Jill's passing, benefits anybody, but if there's one thing for sure, it's that my kids and I are just absolutely for each other, super close, deeply bonded. I would trade anything, to sort of, support them and help them, and they for me. And so it's been really sweet. We've had a lot of fun together. We build Legos and we play board games and we enjoy really good food. And we've been watching, a lot of movies and television shows and comedy. We watch a lot of comedy, and just remembering that there's still, sort of light in the world. And we've got a couple dogs that are just absolute knuckleheads. So, they, they delight us. They're so stupid, but they're funny. And so anyway, those are, just like you realize oh, wow, this is a, this weekend we made some spaghetti, and like, I'm really learning how to make good food and healthy food for the kids. And people brought so much food and it was so great to be cared for, but it's like, you just don't want to be, it's not the dependency on others, but it's like, it's like there's a whole new rhythm to that. So I made this really delicious, spaghetti dinner, and, it's kind of like, it's fun just to, hey, wow, like this isn't quite what Jill would have made, not nearly as good, but it's not that bad. And the kids, the kids got fed. I like to joke with some friends of mine. I was like, man, this family, they like want to eat every single day. I can't believe it.
Here's your next book, Dad's Not That Bad Cookbook. There you go.
I like it.
What have been some things, because, most of us listening try to help people grieve. And, we're doing the service, or we're coming around families, or we're offering pastoral care, or we're in group with people. Without naming names, what has been helpful and what has not been helpful?
Well, at first, I think every single person is different. So, things that might support my mother in her grief and losing a daughter-in-law, or things that might support me or my children or others who are around. Like, everyone lost something. Everyone who knew Jill lost something really precious and special. And Jill was very others oriented. So, just so many people they're just so deeply impacted by Jill's loss in ways that, only Jill would have seen how much she wouldn't even have known or acknowledged, but she was just so central to so many people. So, I mean, first, just recognizing that you can't put words to grief. And so just slowing down and listening. It is interesting now, being 90 days out, that, the numbers of people who check in with you is diminishing. And those who do check in, have been checking in every few weeks or more, or whatever rhythm. There's a few people that are like, hey, I'm praying for you today. Like, how are you doing today? You don't have to answer if you don't want to answer, but just want you to know I'm praying for you. What are specific things, if you want to say, that I could be praying for? I got this absolutely beautiful note that brought tears to my eyes the first week of January from a friend, Nancy Guthrie, who said, I suppose for most of us, 2020, we're glad to see it go, but for you, 2021 means, a whole year of empty bed, empty table, empty house, empty, and it's just like, she put words exactly to the way I was feeling about the new year. And so that would be one encouragement I'd have for you, is like, first, don't sort of step into someone's grief. It's okay not to, it's okay not to say things, but it doesn't help if you just, if it's real simplistic and it's almost never bad to say something, but the best, I think, way to enter someone's grief is to try to think about what they might be what they might be feeling in that moment, and actually going for it. You know, I got a note from my brother's wife's mother, and she's just a few days ago. She said, "Hey, you know, for a lot of us, people probably moved on, but I'm just telling you, I'm still thinking about the fact that your loss has to hurt." And so I think those things matter so much to us.
Any notes for us, David, from what you're learning so far on grieving or navigating a personal crisis, personal loss, while also running a company? That is doubly hard.
Well, for one thing, I actually felt like when COVID hit, you know, I remember when I sent you a note, Carey, back in November of 2019. I sent you a little video message. It would have been just a month or so after Jill's diagnosis, and I was starting to tell people at that time that this was going to be terminal. And because, you know, you have to be careful not to, you know, in deciding to live publicly. I mean, this is one of the things that I think leaders have to make their own decisions about, is how personal do you get, what do you share with everyone, what is private. Jill was very open about things, so that made it a little easier, and that she was not, you know, she was not temperamentally inclined towards a lot of privacy, and so or undue privacy about some of those things. And so she was fine with us sharing, you know, kind of the journey, but in those early months, we didn't want to share too much. So I think that's one decision. I remember we talked to Lisa Turkhurst a little about that in one of our previous podcasts, about, you know, the things that are confidential, things that are private, things that are, you know, how do we lead authentically as we talk about the issues we're dealing with. And you sent me a note back, and, you know, it was so sweet. You know, you were touched, and you were in tears for me. And it's like, whatever I can do for you in this next year, you let me know. And that actually meant so much to me that I was like, hey, I would like to work with Carey. But it was also like, as we started talking about the state of the church 2020, and, you know, and work we were going to do together, I was like, you know, I feel like Carey could really be not just sort of a, you know, business colleague, but a friend through this. So that would be one other lesson for me, is like, just figure out who could be real friends for you as you go through crisis, and, you know, lean on them as hard as you can. And then, of course, when COVID happened, there was something actually very peaceful about that whole experience. I mean, it wasn't fun. Nobody enjoyed the quarantine and some of the pivots that we all did. But I was like, wow, the external reality in the whole world now matches how my own leadership reality is. And so I actually think God uses suffering to help us as leaders, and not just so we can be better leaders and more effective and all the rest, but he connects our heads and our hearts through suffering in ways that are so important. I'm so much more present to what other people, I have so much more to go in my journey on this, but so much more present to the suffering of other people. So much more aware of just how limited, you know, our lives are, and, you know, just humbled before the Lord in that. And so I feel like leading our company through COVID, you know, certainly wasn't easy. Wasn't like we made every step correctly, but, you know, God was using the experience with Jill to help prepare me even for that.
I really appreciate you sharing that, David, because we weren't really working super closely together at the time you sent me that. And you kind of brought me in sort of with that journey. You'd send me a text, or we do fake Marco Polo where you video something to me and I video something to you, right? That kind of thing. And I remember, I mean, because I've always found that as a pastor, pastoral empathy is not my natural gifting. But I just remember like cheering for you when the diagnosis was good, and mourning with you when the diagnosis wasn't so good. But I would just say, you know, what I felt in that moment, because I remember that exchange, was I just need to be for David, whatever that matters, sort of borrowing the language of our mutual friend, Jeff Henderson. I just want to be for you. And I think if I can just say to leaders who maybe aren't going through what David has gone through and is going through, if you can just figure out how to be for that, and you don't have the bandwidth, this is a whole other podcast, whole other book, but, you know, I almost got burned out from compassion fatigue, right? You lead a big church. It's like, this is happening multiple times a day, but there's a handful of people you can go through this with, and make sure you're going through it with them, and then try to help as much. And it was also really helpful for me to know that those texts, Like I remember in the weeks and months after Jill died, I would text you and I wouldn't always hear a reply. And I'm like, that's okay. David's going through his stuff, but those were still welcome, right?
Yeah, I think there's almost never an instance where you should say, "Oh, I don't want to bother that person," because for
Mm,
me, it was just, I was overwhelmed with cards and letters and
yeah.
messages and other things, and so sometimes it was simply just a matter of just having the bandwidth to respond.
Oh, I
Actually,
get it. But
my
like those
memory,
are still welcome, right?
absolutely, yeah. I think there's always, unless you put your foot in your mouth and sort of say something really really stupid, right? Like,
I'm gonna
you
send
know,
you a text tomorrow. David, I got all kinds of advice for you.
yeah,
Want
yeah,
to take a call?
perfect. Or somehow God, you deserve this because some
Oh,
unfaithfulness in your life, and there was
oh
a few of
man.
those kinds of weird things.
Oh,
Um but I think anytime you can reach out is a good thing, and I think it's important then as leaders who are going through crisis for us to really, and Jesus does this, to sort of, he's got his 12, but he also had his 3.
mm,
And so it's okay to shrink your circle of the people that you can rely on for certain things, and not just to get things done, but like there's, you don't have to, even as Jill and I were very open about her journey and blogging about that, and I've been on Twitter trying to post remembrances of Jill or certain milestones, because I'm a human who's lost a wife. Um, but I think it's okay for us to have places where we are very private, and like the journey that the Lord has me on in my grief has been its own kind of um, you know very intimate, very very precious, very difficult thing. But it is important for us to have people that we can lean on, and not everybody who has been your best friend up until that moment, you just can't keep them all up to date about every single part of that journey.
yeah. Yeah. Well, you're back on the podcast and you're stepping back, kind of easing back into Barna. And I know the team has been working on a number of projects. So just give us a sneak peek as we wrap up into what's ahead for you and for Barna and where people can learn more, David.
Well, a couple things that we're working on this year that I'm really excited about. I mean, first, we just launched a brand new what we call Volume 2 Gen Z. We had probably our best-selling report of our last 5-6 years was Gen Z. Really talked about the dynamics of that generation, sort of the next generation. And so Volume 2 just came out, and so you can check that out at barna.com. You can also check out the Reaching Gen Z Lab, which will be kicking off in early March. And so it's a guided 6-week experience for you to sort of create a ministry plan around Gen Z and the research findings. And on the topic of next gen, lots and lots of stuff on Barna Access, so people
Mm,
can subscribe there. So that's been awesome. And uh, among the things, again, I'm just so proud of the team. It's like, it feels like they've stewarded this vision that George and Nancy Barna started. You've been such a great support. Our friends at Glue, our friends, many of our partners have been such a great support through this. But we're going to be doing a lot of city work where we look at the trends, sort of micro trends in specific cities around the country. So we're excited about that. You'll be hearing more about that from us. I'm actually looking forward to start working on a new book project and some new things coming out. But anyway, it's been, like I said at several points through this podcast. I feel like I'm in the background. I'm not fully back, but I'm also sort of giving myself permission just to do the things that I'm really enjoying, and
mhm,
being good at the research and being good at running the company is fun. Sort of like, okay, yeah, cool. It feels like a little normal. It's weird, like not getting text from Jill, or like
mm,
trying to, like, oh yeah, like so many points during a week or a day, I'm like, hey, I wanted to reach out and mention something to Jill or talk to her about something. It's like, oh man, just the loss hits on so many levels,
mm.
or parenting my kids. But again, as the Lord allows, um I'm so grateful to be here and serving the church through this company and with this team and with you, Carey. So thanks so much to listeners and those who have been so supportive and generous and thoughtful. It's meant so much to me and to my family, and so want to
Wow.
for sure thank you for that.
David, thank you. Just so appreciate your friendship, your leadership, all that you're doing. And I know this has helped a lot of leaders. So We'll be back next time on Church Pulse Weekly with a little more usual episode, but I'm so glad we did this. And David, it's good to be together. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, Carey. Thanks so much, friend.